Told you I'd be back. So, I had posted a question to my friends on social media, wondering their take on whether teachers in schools now should be carrying or not. I was probably like most of you and naive to a lot of facts, and after doing research on the subject, I became woke, as you will, to the reality of things. But anyways, so I posted saying, tell me yay or nay whether you would be for or against teachers carrying in schools and why. I really wanted to hear people's thoughts on it. And a lot of people said, they were all for it. Some people said absolutely not. There was a perspective from a good friend of mine that I really hadn't taken into account, and I appreciated, which was, her being a teacher. She thought teachers are already burdened enough with the things that they're burdened with teaching our children, and that asking something like this of them is a little too much, which I don't disagree with. So there was other people who had suggested retired veterans being stationed at schools, or police officers, or even our armed guards being stationed at school, which I could see, I could understand. I get why people go to that thinking. So I, like I said, was obviously uneducated about the topic, and after I'd brought it up, I realized I wanted to do a little more research to get an understanding about it. So I went online and I did some research, and what I found was the most recent thing. Northeastern University just published or recently published some research on school shootings, and which I was not aware of. So back in the 1990s, we enacted this law that made schools gun-free zones. I wasn't aware of when that was enacted or how it came into play. So then I researched kind of why we would enact something like that. And it turns out that back in the 1990s, school shootings were at an all-time high, and our government wanted to be able to combat that. So they, across the board, made schools gun-free zones. And the mainstream media will have you believe otherwise, but the reality is since the 1990s, school shootings have been on the decline, like significant decline compared to then. In the 1990s, a child, which would have been me at that point, and I'm sure most of you, a child was four times more likely to be shot in a school shooting than they are today. So why the hype all of a sudden? Well, the hype all of a sudden has to do with mainstream media and the way that they're portraying school shootings as, they happen every single 5 minutes, which they don't. And I think children's instant access to the internet has aided in some of their fears. I think overhearing adults talk about it and whatnot has aided in a lot of their fears. So my point is, I hope a lot of you understand that school shootings are not on the rise. They have been on the decline since the 1990s, since we enacted this banning of guns on school property. And then to touch on the people who say we should have police officers and armed guards and retired veterans stationed outside of schools, and we should have metal detectors for our children to walk through. I will be completely honest when I say that originally I was wholeheartedly for the idea. I said, yeah, let's keep our kids safe no matter what. But then after doing some research, I started to realize that this would only aid in causing more fear for our children. Could you imagine as a child walking into a school with armed guards stationed out front, or having to walk through metal detectors every single day to go to school? That causes significant stress on children. We want children to feel safe at school. We obviously want our children to be safe at school, and the reality is that a school is one of the most safest places for your children to be right now. So, like I said, Northeastern University published a bunch of research on the whole school shooting, everything involving school shootings, and they actually said that your child is more likely to die in a bicycle accident or an accidental drowning than they are to die in a school shooting. But yet we ignore those very real facts, and we just focus on school shootings, and we talk about it consistently, and we allow mainstream media to portray like this is happening every 5 seconds around our nation, when in reality it's not. I hope that all of you parents understand that there are very real threats to your children's safety, and that I don't think you can completely ignore the possibility of a school shooting happening, but by trying to combat it, we're not really helping our children at all. So, like I said, many of the things that we're calling for to combat school shootings will really do nothing but instill more fear in our children. So one of specifically the gun control laws that we were calling for, or people were calling for, to combat specifically school shootings, was to raise the age for somebody to be able to buy an assault rifle, if you will. I don't like that terminology, but it originally in a lot of states was 18, and there are many people trying to raise it to 21. Well, there was only a less than handful of school shootings that where somebody actually used an assault rifle. So raising that was between the age of 18 and 20. So raising the age to 21 wouldn't necessarily combat school shootings. So I'm all for gun control laws to a degree. I'm all for anything to help keep people safe, keep specifically our children safe. I have children. So, but many of these laws don't make much sense when put into perspective, and that's kind of why, everybody calls us gun nuts, but that's why many of us are against a lot of these laws that are trying to be enacted, because we feel like it's all just smoke and mirrors. We feel like there are some lawmakers who will lead you to believe that they're trying to do everything to combat school shootings or mass shootings, and yet the laws that they're trying to enact really won't do anything. And then people call us crazy gun owners who are against these laws because they don't understand really the logistics or semantics behind it. So, like I said, I asked this question originally to friends on social media because I wanted to get their stance on it, but then that led me to realize I wasn't really aware of a lot of facts behind the situation, and I went and did a lot of research and tried to get myself more educated on the subject. in the hopes that I could better understand it. And I was able to better understand it. I was able to see why having teachers carrying and why placing armed guards out front of our schools wouldn't be beneficial to our children, who would just constantly live in a state of fear every day. And I think mainstream media, and maybe us in general, parents in general, have already added enough fear to our children's plate. And the idea of them going to school every day and possibly becoming, part of a school shooting. So I don't think that we need anything to add to that stress onto them. So I hope that you guys get out there and do some research on the topic. I will say this, the one thing I did find at the end of the day to think of as a good solution in stopping school shootings is the very real fact that many of our school counselors are burdened with dealing with roughly about 500 children to just themselves. So it's roughly about a 500 to 1 ratio. I think school counselors, if they were able to focus on less children and a lot of their casework was not so burdened down with so many children, that they may be able to point out some potential problems or potential threats or anything with children, with specific children. They would be able to focus on individual children more and be able to hear what some of these kids are actually trying to say and trying to get across to many. A lot of times with school shootings, I think a lot of people drop the ball. There was many signs, looking back on it, that a lot of people failed to recognize and a lot of people missed. And had one person actually been paying attention, then it might have been halted. And I think school counselors are one of those forefront people to be able to recognize some of these signs of dangerous things that these children may be doing or saying. But it's getting overlooked because school counselors are really overburdened right now with the amount of children they're faced with trying to keep attractive. So I think that maybe one thing that I can come away and say that I would wholeheartedly support is the need for more school counselors in schools. We need to take that burden off of them. There should not be a roughly 500 to 1 ratio for school counselors and children. Like, school counselors maybe at the most should have 30, 50 kids that they're keeping attractive and able to focus on, not 500. So that is my takeaway from the whole thing. Will anybody figure out a way to really combat school shootings or mass shootings? No, because these people are vile. They have very vile thoughts. Anybody who has the intention of just going out and harming innocent people is just vile at this point. And I hope that we can all figure out some ways that to combat the problem that will really help and really make a difference to eventually, make school shootings or mass shootings a thing of the past. But right now, we're all just, I feel like everybody's just kind of smoke and mirrors, and nobody really knows how to implement anything. So anyways, that's my take on everything. I hope you guys get out and do some research on it, because I found it extremely eye-opening to come to understand some facts that I was not aware of, and to obviously hear some other people's point of view, and then to put that into real, perspective about how it would actually play out in the eyes of my child or my children. So like I said, I urge you guys to get out and do some research on the matter. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Please like this video. And as always, I'm sure you'll be hearing from me soon.